Green crops provide the cheapest animal food, rich in protein. But the period of maximum food value is a short one, and thereafter the crude protein content falls by as much as 3% per week. It is essential, therefore, to cut green crops at the stage of highest food value and to store them for later use. The moisture content of green crops varies with the stage of growth, with the season, the type of soil, and, of course, with the weather. It may be even as high as 80% of the total weight of the cut crop. If the crop is to be safely stored, it must be dried to a moisture content of not more than 20%, so that for every ton of dried material, some 3 tons of water must be evaporated. Crop drying has always depended on exposing as large a surface as possible to the drying influence of air. Mechanization helped to reduce the amount of labor and time involved, but still it was always advisable to make hay only while the sun shone. This restricted the haymaking season to high summer, but even then, with our weather, rain could ruin a whole crop. Some new varieties of green crops with a higher yield per acre and higher feeding value reach the cutting stage outside the normal haymaking season. This makes their harvesting more chancy. The risk of bad weather, together with the extension of the growing season, has created a need for new methods of green crop drying. Today, the farmer is able to plan a succession of green crops and to harvest them at their highest feeding value without weather risk, by drying them artificially. Left to itself, the moisture from a sodden piece of flannel evaporates slowly if exposed to the atmosphere. This process can be speeded up in various ways, by heating the material or the atmosphere around it, by sucking away the water vapor, by chemical absorbance, or by increasing the airflow. All practical forms of crop drying depend upon either increasing the temperature of the surrounding air to increase its moisture carrying capacity, or increasing the rate of airflow in contact with the surface of the material, or a combination of the two. Their purpose is simply to reduce the moisture content of the material to a value at which it can be stored without deterioration. Barn hay drying is a way of continuing the drying of field-wilted hay under controlled conditions. In the field, drying begins by exposure to the sun and wind, aided by turning and tedding. The dryer continues the job, eliminates the weather risk, and so reduces the loss of protein value caused by shattering if the almost dry hay is handled for too long in the field. The requirements for barn hay drying are fairly simple. A walled barn ventilated to eaves, or a partitioned off part of one, a framework sloping down to the end and to each side to ensure an even distribution of air, and supporting a false floor, which can be of wattle hurdle, chestnut fencing, or wire mesh. A short air duct, usually block or brick built, and a fan capable of producing an airspeed of 20 to 25 feet per minute through the hay. Wilted hay is spread evenly to a depth of about 8 feet, and cold air is blown through it continuously until the moisture content is reduced to some 30%, when a further loading of 8 feet of wilted hay can be added. Successive loadings can be filled and dried until the hay is 15 to 18 feet deep, and the moisture content of the whole is reduced to some 20%. There are a few basic rules of operation. The first one's pretty simple. Cut as soon as possible after the dew is off, and no more than is needed for one loading. Turn and ted soon after cutting. Tedding is essential to ensure that the grass dries out evenly. Don't let it bleach on top and stay green underneath. Continue to turn and ted. The aim is to reduce the moisture content to less than 50% before canting, so that the hay can be dried more quickly in the barn. This not only uses less electricity, but ensures a higher protein content because the hay is dried while it is still in optimum condition. Experience will soon show when the hay is fit to load. It should be shaken out when loaded so as to give the airstream a chance to dry the hay more evenly. Loading should be done from a platform to avoid trampling on the wilted hay and to facilitate even spreading. If it is not spread evenly, there may be a thick concentration of hay, a sort of damp spot through which the airstream cannot flow. It is important not to rush successive loadings. Allow 2 or 3 days between loadings, so that the previous loading can dry out to a moisture content of about 30%. After drying, the hay can be moved so as to free the barn hay dryer for another filling. Barn hay drying is an economic way of preserving hay as a high-quality winter feed. And in a bad season, it can be the only means of saving the hay at all. Existing buildings can be adapted easily for barn hay drying. And whatever the size of the installation, its operation is simple. Starter switches control the fans, while air pressure is indicated on a simple water gauge. Compared with field-made hay, barn-dried hay has a better color and higher protein value. It provides an economic supplement to winter rations. Properly applied, barn hay drying can guarantee good quality hay under the least promising conditions. But the process calls for advice in the initial stages of use and judgment in application. Many farms throughout the country already have platform-type grain dryers. These can be adapted quite easily to dry green crops as well. All that is needed is a false floor laid over the sack platform, provision of appropriate walling, and an additional fan to give a greater airflow. Drying in this case must be done by the high-low blow method. For the first 2 days, the full output of the fans is used to blow unheated air at a high rate through the 5 to 7 foot depth of field wilted grass. This reduces the moisture content to about 40%. The shrinkage shown in our diagrams illustrates the reduction of moisture content and not, of course, shrinkage in the volume of grass. On the 3rd day, the heater bank is switched on with one fan baffled. Blowing at a low rate for 24 hours reduces the moisture content to 20% or less. The dried grass can then be baled out or stored as required and a further batch loaded. A later development, particularly suitable for the small mixed farm, is the 3-bay layout with weld mesh platforms. Here, each bay has its own fan, and a movable heater serves each of them in turn. Drying is carried out almost continuously by emptying and refilling one bay each day in turn, and by moving the heater so that the grass in each bay has 2 days of cold air and 1 day of warm air before emptying. By this means, a throughput of 6 to 7 tons of dried grass can be achieved every week from 3 bays, each of 160 square feet. Here, too, existing buildings can be used, and the installation is operated simply and economically. But once again, the dryer is simply an extension under controlled conditions of a process started in the field. But in this case, wilting is only necessary to 60 or 65%, enabling the cut crop to be cleared more quickly. Good field technique is essential. It makes the job easier and cheaper by evaporating a high proportion of the moisture by natural means. Green crop drying can reduce losses and improve food value. It can extend the growing season too, for it enables a succession of crops to be cut and dried when they're at their maximum protein value. It's advisable for the farmer to get expert advice on the type of equipment most suitable for his requirements. But electricity means that these results can be achieved simply and economically.